right, I'm here with Jarrett Stepman of the Heritage Foundation, and we're talking about his book, The War on History. Welcome, Jarrett, to NTD.
Thank you very much.
So, the War on History. There's been some very big public examples of taking down Confederate statues and that kind of thing. What else are you looking at in your book?
Well, I think it comes more than just simply the attacks on the Confederate statues, because I think those were kind of the opening salvo. But we're really talking about attacks on the founding fathers. I mean, Thomas Jefferson, even George Washington, there was a mural in San Francisco that they had to cover up because they thought it would offend students. This is really an across-the-board attack on what ultimately America stands for, the Constitution, the principles of the Declaration of Independence. These things are now portrayed as hypocritical or just plain wrong or, against what modern America should be. And I think that that's a dangerous thing. Americans have always been able to attach their founding principles and what this country was founded on, the great people who brought us, the flawed people who brought us these things to be proud of. I think the narrative is now very different, that we should be ashamed of our history, that we should feel guilt about it, and America should be maybe fundamentally transformed and changed because it was rotten from the beginning.
Right, so that was something I was thinking about. I mean, your founding story is usually something you can be proud of. I'm proud to be American, here's the founding story. So what happens when that's gone?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a founding story, and I would say that there's a lot of things that make America unexceptional. I think that's what they focus on. They focus on the negative parts of our history, which is every human society on earth will have negative aspects.
Right.
And they miss what has made us exceptional. So that when you tell a young person, well, look at all these bad things America's done. They lied to you all those years. America's really awful. But without the larger context of world history, which has happened across the globe, which has happened in countries, our neighbors, there's a reason why people have desperately tried to come into the United States.
Right.
For generations, for our entire country's history, even with the problems that we have. I think America's always strived to become a more perfect union, but will never become a perfect union. And I think for some, they think that because America is not perfect, it must be bad, it must be terrible. And I think that's a dangerous ideology. It's why I oppose the taking down of statues, the attacks on American history, because it gives us a blinkered view of what that history is. We should acknowledge that our past is not perfect, just as humanity is, and we'll never perfect it. But we should be proud of the accomplishments that we do have and want to further those things, want to make them, young Americans especially, understand that this heritage that they come from and further that idea, that concept of liberty, which has been a beacon of hope for people across the world.
So you mentioned earlier some things that are being taught, not just cherry-picked, but that are outright wrong.
Yes.
Do you have some examples of that?
Well, I think the 1619 project, sponsored by New York Times Magazine, has been a big part of that. And they create some misconceptions. One, in one of their lead essays, of course, they said they want to reframe American history to say that our real founding is 1619, when African slaves were brought to America, not 1776, which most people would say, well, that is the founding of America. And they make outlandish claims, as if they say that the American Revolution was started to preserve and protect slavery, specifically, which is just wrong. It has been corrected by historians, not just conservative historians, but liberal historians too. Gordon Wood, James McPherson, these are legendary historians of the American founding and the Civil War who have said outright, this is just wrong. Unfortunately, the 1619 Project has not corrected this. They continue to push these materials in American schools, K-12, especially high schools. They have materials in 3,500 schools across this country, according to Report in Real Clear Investigations. So they continue to push this narrative despite the deep flaws, the inaccuracies, and of course the overall ideology, which says essentially America, capitalism, all these things are essentially evil.
So what do you think is what's behind all this? Where is this going? Why is it happening?
I think there are people who do have an agenda that they want America, honestly, to be a socialist country. They want to have Americans embrace these collectivist doctrines. I do think that especially their role in promoting a kind of identity politics is ultimately nihilistic. It pits Americans against each other. It makes it so that, look, George Washington in their narrative is a white hero, Frederick Douglass is a black hero, but these should be American heroes. And they don't like that narrative. And I think that it does ultimately, they hope that it'll lead Americans to embrace radical doctrines, socialism, whatever you might call it. And I think that that's why it is such a danger, especially as a lot of young people don't know much about history, or they have been deeply misinformed, and they've been let down by their schools and of course popular entertainment in our institutions. And that's why this war it has to be fought. It really is about America's future generations. Are we going to continue the legacy, this incredible legacy that has brought incredible freedom and prosperity to the American people, or are we going to fundamentally transform America and be something completely different?
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger.
And it strikes me, if you're teaching kids, they're not going to go and read a whole bunch of books and compare and try to find out what's true. I heard a story the other day from a mom. This is actually in Australia, not here, but her daughter is in last year of high school, and she wrote a paper saying Lenin was bad, and the teacher held up her paper in class and told her to read the paragraph in the textbook that told her why Lenin was good, and told her she was wrong in front of the whole class.
That's really incredible, and you do get that, and you do get that in classrooms, unfortunately, across this country, and I think that's why it's so important, especially if you are a parent, to know what your child is learning. And if push comes to shove, I embrace fully the doctrine of school choice and having other options available to parents. That's what my parents pulled me out of a public school at a very young age, because they weren't teaching American history and Americanism, and they were teaching some very bad values. It is up to parents to kind of counter that, and there are materials, there are sources, if you care about American history, that you can go to. It's not always easy. Unfortunately, the media environment that we have today, our institutions are very much against it, but there is opportunity.
Your book?
My book, for one, The War on History, is certainly a good resource if you want to kind of correct and check the narratives about the American founding, and really a whole host of American figures and ideas. And if you want to have those arguments with your children, your neighbors, or whoever it is, I think my book is a very good source for that, and will kind of promote a positive Americanism that grapples with the flaws of American history, but also accentuates the things that are truly great about this country that, frankly, I think every person can truly be proud of.
It just kind of strikes me that it's kind of like teaching a half glass full view of history versus a half glass empty view of history, rather than a half glass full. Let's make us all pessimists, only look at the dark sides.
Or in the case of the 6019 project, a glass completely empty. And I think that's really what you are getting from some of those who peddle kind of on the other side of this. And that's a shame, because I think this is really what sustained this republic from its beginning, that Americans have passed on these traditions. You don't need to know every detail about history, but you knew that our founding was fundamentally good, that you believed in the Constitution. This is a remarkable thing that is unique in world history, that we should want to further that. We haven't been around for a long time, but our success is incredible. And to further that prosperity so that our children and grandchildren can have those same opportunities and more than we did. That's a very American principle, and it would be unfortunate to see us lose sight of our history and what we are, and to become something else, become very average.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.